Welcome. Tonight is Monday, April 12th, 2021. It is 7 o'clock p.m. This is the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter. We are holding the meeting in person and virtually. With that, we will call the meeting to order, and would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, everyone should have the agenda in front of them. Are there any changes, additions, corrections to the agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Carrie Johnson will
Emily.
second.
Okay, Ed 1, Carrie 2. All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes from our March 22nd, 2021 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 6 through 10. Are there any corrections or changes to those minutes? Carrie?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm just noticing in the second paragraph, it looks like that paragraph needs to be updated because I believe it was from the previous meeting that Councilmember Johnson presided over the meeting, and then so I remember you being present at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
Did you get that one, Barb? The second paragraph on page 6.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, all right. Good grab. Anyone else? Changes or corrections? Everyone find that, or what Carrie was talking about? Second paragraph on page 6 will be deleted. Everyone, with that one change, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Emily will move.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Emily 1, Carrie 2. All in favor of the minutes as amended, as deleted, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we'll address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience, either virtually or in person, that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Mr. Rosso is here, and I'm assuming you want to speak on the bees.
That is correct.
Okay. Anyone else, virtually or in person, that would like to speak on an agenda item? I
Yes,
see-
I'd like to speak on the bee ordinance also. It's Peter Westry.
Okay. So when that item comes up on our agenda, we will address you at that point. And you'll be able to present or state your pro or con as to what you would like to talk to the council about. Anyone else on the agenda items? Anyone that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Okay, seeing no one, we will move on. Next, we will have the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 11 and concludes with the resolution on pages 30 through 32, and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000 to St. Peter well drilling for well number 7 repair at $10,709.60. Next up, we have seasonal employee appointments. There are 56 of them, ranging, most of them have to do with the pool and the rec department. There are a few other ones for some of Pete's areas, the streets. Next, we have a temporary on-sale liquor license to the Nicollet County Ag Society for 400 West Union from 6/5/21 and also 8/12/21 to 8/15/21. Following vehicles are put up for surplus and are going to be disposed of in the manner fitting: a 2006 Kia Sedona and a 2002 BMW. The following individual is appointed to Parks and Rec Advisory Board as the School District 508 representative, and that is Barb Regner. Plus the regular schedule of disbursements for March 18th, 2021 through April 7th, 2021. Are there any questions, comments about the consent agenda? You see anybody up there, Ed?
Emily
No,
has her
I do
hand up,
not.
Mr. Mayor.
Is Emily? No? Okay.
Oh,
Emily, did you, I'm sorry, Emily, but you were in a small square. We just saw you.
Yeah, that's fine. Pete, my question is for you. Is the well failure just like typical maintenance that comes up, and how regularly does that happen? I was just curious.
Really depends on the water quality coming from each well. So what we're seeing is the Jordan aquifer, the shallow stuff lasts usually about 8 to 10 years. The middle aquifer, which is the fig, will last about 6 years. Well 7, depending on how much we use it, and well 11, I believe it is. Both of those are Mount Simon wells. They'll last 5 years.
Cool. Thanks, Pete.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments on the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Ed will make a motion to
Noel.
approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any other questions at this point? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Can everyone hear me, since Barb couldn't hear me the first time? Are we okay?
Let me see. Thumbs up.
Everyone's just okay? All right. Next, we will go to unfinished business, which we have none, so we will move to new business. And the first up, we have the North 3rd Street, Center Street, and McLeod Street from West St. Julian to 1,000 feet north project bid award. And it's Pete, and Jeff Knutson is not here tonight. I saw his name on the memo. Jeff and Jeff Domers, then I guess, are here. Pete, take it away.
Sure, we'll tag team on this one here. Mayor Zeman and City Council, before you tonight, you have a memo and a resolution asking you to authorize Wendell Lawrence and Sons Construction from Mankato, Minnesota, to complete the work on North 3rd Street, Center McLeod Street. It's about 1,000 feet north of St. Julian Street, with the amount of $536,844.36. As you can see on page 34, we had about 8 bidders that came in and ranged in cost from $536,000 to about $700,000. The low bidder was roughly $51,000 underneath our engineer's estimate, which we were happy to see, and the timing of this project is very critical to getting a good price. Our plan on North 3rd Street hasn't changed. We still plan to install storm sewer to complete drainage. We'll have some piping that does some treatment work for us. Along Center Street, we'll also have water main and sanitary sewer extensions to the north of McLeod Street. Our goal here tonight would be to put curb and gutter and an asphalt roadway in there, improve the drainage, and provide for a very passable street here in the near future. To finance this project, of course, we'll have assessments, which we have gone through the 429 process, and we have really narrowed that down to what I would call a successful venture based on where we started. And the city's portion of the cost would be completed by general obligation bonds, as you guys are well aware, since we've talked about this one multiple times. The city is sharing in cost here with the project, working on our normal assessment policy. We'll have a significant cost related to how this project's undertaken. This is the last council meeting that we can take action on this. We have run the 60-day cycle for the process, and we are asking that you approve the resolution on page 35.
Questions? Brad?
Just a question on the funding process. So we approved $720,000 in bonds for it. what happens with the difference there? Do we only issue 536,000? So just curious, this is my first, on how that functions.
So let me jump in on that one, Pete and Mr. Mayor, if I may. So the amount that you see tonight is for the construction. That does not include the engineering and other work that has gone on. And so we will still issue for the amount that we originally projected. That projection was done knowing what this bid was at that time. Sometimes that doesn't occur, but in this instance it was. And of course, we then are within $5,000 increments, as I think Shannon's explained to members before.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Carrie?
So we've taken a number of actions. This has been something we've worked on for a while. So my question really involves really trying to understand the order of operations. So these bids would have been received prior to the action that we took a couple weeks ago, because
Yes.
those bids were used to determine what was the projected cost to the assessment cost to the property owners.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's making the assumption that we'll take the lowest bid, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank
Correct.
you. That's
Yeah, we analyze at that point what is a lowest reasonable bid. And so if we would have had a contractor or a situation where they didn't bid appropriately, where there was something not done right from a bidder perspective that was lowest, that would have been thrown out as a part of that initial analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else?
I don't see anybody.
Pete, got a question for you. I'm reading the
Yes.
memo, and I see this amount of $536,844.36, and then I go to the resolution on the next page, on page 35, and I'm going down, and I went, wow, somebody here must know what our estimate is, because I see an engineering estimate for that same amount, or very, very close. I don't remember in the 9+ years where we ever put that on a separate list under bidder, the engineering estimate, and I think it's, in future, might be kind of confusing for people if they go in and look at this.
Yeah.
And then it's repeated down below. You know,
Yeah.
there might be a
I agree.
company at some point in time that's called engineering estimate, maybe, I'm not sure, but anyway, it just, I kind of noticed it, I guess, more than anything. So I would like to, on the resolution, strike that line 3 where it says engineering estimate, unless someone sees a reason to keep it in there, it's repeated right below that, so. All right. Any other questions, comments? The resolution awarding bid for the North 3rd Street Center and McLeod Streets from north to West St. Julian, 1,000 feet, appears on page 35 and 36 with the striking of engineer's estimate in the list of bidders and the amount. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed'll make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved with the one change. Next
Thank
up,
you.
we have Stormwater Fund budgets for 2021 and 2022. And Sally, Pete, Todd, Sally first? Whoever. You go ahead, Sally. Just need to push the button.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Mayor Zeman and city council members, as the mayor said, I'm here to present the stormwater budget and a proposed rate increase. The stormwater budget memo starts on page 38 And we have two resolutions on pages 55, one approving the budgets for 21 and 22 for stormwater, and on page 56, the resolution proposing for a rate increase to $33.74 an acre beginning July 1st of 2021. The stormwater services include stormwater management, planning, reviewing, and inspection of the construction in the city right-of-way or public improvements. An example of that is at Traverse Green. Locating city-owned utilities in the right-of-way, and repair and maintenance of stormwater infrastructure within our community. The current rate based on the residential equivalency factor, or REF it's sometimes called, currently is $22.50 an acre and has been in place since the stormwater rates were implemented in 2007. The table at the page on page 38 shows the current and proposed rates for each land use in the city of St. Peter. And there's 5 classifications or land uses that have been used in the past. The first one is the single family and multifamily units or less, 5 units or less in a duplex on a residential lot. The equivalency factor, residential equivalency factor for that is 1/3 of an acre. And currently there are 2,803 properties that fall within the city right now. And the current monthly rate, if you take the $22.50 times 0.333, you'll come to $7.50 a month is what the charge is on those customers. And the new proposed rate is $11.25 per month. For manufactured housing, park, public and private schools, the regional treatment center and the hospital, residential equivalency factor is a 0.5, and right now there are 19 customers that fall in there, and their monthly rate is $11.25 per acre, and their proposed rate is going to go up to $16.87. Then we have multifamily residentials of 6 units or more, places of worship and government buildings, and they're at a 1. So for every acre they have, they pay $22.50. And right now we have 432 customers that fall into that. So their current rate is $22.50 per acre, and that will go up to $33.70. It should be $33.74. I put $33.75 there. And then industrial, they're at 1.5. Residential equivalency factor. Right now there are 16 customers in the city that are on that, and their current monthly rate is $33.75, and their proposed rate will go up to $50.62. And then we have commercial / businesses, and they're at 1.75 per acre, and we have 305 of those. One of the things to think about in a business though, like downtown St. Peter, you have some businesses. It's 1.75 an acre, but they don't have a whole lot of square footage. So looking at the Flame Bar, they're at it's less than 0.05 or something if you look at them. But they're at a 1.75 because they have a lot of runoff. They have no green space to absorb any water, so their water all runs off. So that's why the businesses are at the higher 1.75. You're looking at how much of their rainwater runs into the storm sewer. So we have 305 customers in that category. $39.38 is their monthly rate right now, and we're proposing them to go to $59.07. The reason we're asking for an increase starting July 1st is, and that would generate about $240,000 of additional revenue annually. We're asking for a half year in 21, so it'll be about $120,000 in 21, going to $240,000 for the full year of 22. And our goal for that is to have operating income in the black or a positive number. And if you look at page 44 in your packet, that's the budget without a rate increase, and the operating loss for 2021 is projected to be $17,911, and for 22 it goes to $28,612. On page 47 of the packet, you'll see the same operating income line with the rate increase implemented. And for 2021, on page 50, operating income then grows to $94,487 for 2021, and for 2022, it'll be $196,185. And this will help us cover future debt services on anticipated projects. Future project and capital improvements, like we have Brown Street and Reynolds Street basins that need to be supported at some level in the city. We do have an assessment policy, but it is tough to assess these properties and new development coming into town. So we're asking to try and build some reserves, or at least help us have some cash, unrestricted cash to help fund projects. So the assessment project is what we're asking for. Otherwise, the actual operating budgets for stormwater are, the major portion of that is wages and benefits, as we always are. Employee costs are the driving factor of most of the budgets within the city. And then just operating costs. Also, stormwater does contribute 6.5% of the gross sales to the general fund for all years, 21 and 22. We also are dealing with new regulatory, federal, state, on what goes in stormwater and what treatments have to be made, and Pete can probably talk better to those, but there are regulations that we don't know what might be coming at us. So, but they keep getting stricter and stricter as we go through. On page 39, there are capital projects totaling $242,000 for the 2021 year, and they're listed out. And we're using cash to fund those, $242,000. So as we just approved, there's some for the North 3rd Street, but we're also finishing up 3rd Street from Livermore to Union. So from Broadway all the way through 3rd Street going north will be improved to where we need to go. And then in future years, Pete's team will identify 2 block regions throughout the city that needs improvement. So those will continue to happen every year going forward to an estimated cost of about $66,000 a year. And as we talked about, there's engineering of $20,500 for those projects. Some improvement at Public Works, we spread those amongst the enterprise funds that are out at Public Works. So electric has some in theirs, water, wastewater, and then stormwater, and environmental services. Community Spirit Park improvements, we moved $10,000 from 2020 into 2021 to do some improvements out there. Some land purchases on Old Minnesota, about $25,000. Building improvements for collector and lift stations of $12,000. A mower for $45,000. A Good One pump for $40,000, and then a couple other smaller mowers that are split between different enterprise funds. And each time these when we come to purchase those, we will be coming in front of you as a council to ask for approval on each of those going forward. This, as of 2020, this fund was debt-free. We made the last payment in 2020 on this fund. Probably the next debt will be on the Brown Street Basin when that comes up, and that we have a placeholder in for 2022 for $450,000. Depending upon how development goes and when it happens, as I said, it's a placeholder. It might get pushed to 2023. If something big would happen this year, maybe we'd come to you at the end of 2021 asking for that. But it is a placeholder. We know it's coming as development happens on that end of town. Based on the proposed budget, as of July 1st, it is anticipated that cash position will decrease from a projected balance at the end of 2020 of $1,076,566,000 to $929,054 at the end of 2021, or $155,21 decrease. And then it will also decrease in 2022 to $866,039, or $63,015. The budget, as I said, anticipates using $242 of reserves to fund capital purchases for 2021 and another $262,200 for 2022 projects. The detailed 10-year capital plan is found on page 54, and it ranges anywhere between $137,800 and $677,400, depending upon the projects and the timing of those. And as I said, we face challenges in this fund with regulations that are driven by costs of additional development and the change in rules and regulations regulating stormwater treatment and how the development occurs. Again, we have placeholders in there for some big projects, but we will not spend the money until the development happens. So we'll keep you informed and ask for those and let you know when they're happening. So we are asking you to approve the resolution on page 55 to approve the stormwater budget for 2021, including capital, is $1,190,822, and for 22 it is for $1,424,723. And again, this is a 2-year budget, and that's what we've been going along with. Enterprise funds, we will come back in the fall and tell you how we're doing against the 2021 budget, and if we need any changes or how we think 2022 will look at that point. So.
Okay. Todd or Pete, do you have anything more to add?
Let me let Pete go if he has something, and then I'll chime in at the end, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Sally, you did a nice job of presenting all of our public improvements there. One of the things you talked about was as an MS4 community, we are facing new regulations. We anticipate that within the next few years, we're going to have to change or minimize our salt usage on roadways. So we're looking at options and alternatives right now to have a safe St. Peter for us. We're also looking at ways to complete additional solids retention and regional basin maintenance. What we're finding out is it's more complex than originally thought, and there's more land use regulations related to the materials that are removed. And so as we get into those maintenance units, which will start to pop up here shortly, we're going to try to consider alternate methods for some of that disposal as well.
Mayor and members, let me just comment on one last thing as we look further into the future, Mayor and members, and we talk about bigger capital projects, not purchasing a mower here and there, not those type of things, but major capital development projects like the Brown Street Detention Basin and others. Our ability to assess those projects to contributing property owners is likely to continue to be challenged in that when this was originally put in place, we believed that valuation would continue to grow as a part of stormwater, but as we're seeing with other projects, we don't see valuations grow at the level that we had originally anticipated. So that means as you move projects forward, some money can be paid as a part of development agreements and other things as projects develop. In new areas, that's very easy. But in already existing areas, the ability to assess is minimized to some extent. So it's likely a combination that is mostly rates and a little bit of assessment, rather than in new areas where it's mostly assessment. So I think it's important that you understand that going forward, and that all drives us to being, frankly, to meet compliance, to adhere to the rules, to allow for development to occur. You're going to need more rates to be able to make that go. That's the 2, 4, 6, 8, 10-year future that we see. So, Mr. Mayor, that's, I think, all that we have for you for tonight.
Okay. Questions on the budget?
Yeah. Todd, I talked to you a little bit about this before. I don't have a problem with the budget, but what would an organization have to do to get their usage shifted, like the fairgrounds I'm referring to?
Sure.
I do believe now they're at the multifamily residential, that bracket.
Give me just a second, Ed, to look back in the packet here. I think we treat them as a REF of 1, if I remember right. So they would be multifamily, places of worship, government buildings, facilities, yep.
What would that organization have to do to get it shifted to the manufacturing, housing, park, public, and private schools? Because I know they got buildings there, but they got a lot of green grass.
Sure.
And right now, their bill is like $600 a month, and it'll probably go up to $900.
Sure. So I think currently under your ordinance, there is not a formal review process. that wouldn't restrict them from making that request of the city council and moving that forward. My suggestion would be is that we would want to see additional data related to how much is impervious and how much is pervious. So my recollection is that the fairgrounds is something over 30 acres. I don't remember the exact number, but it's something over 30 acres. And so we'd want to know how much, again, is runoff and how much has green space to soak in. And that might allow us some additional time or additional opportunity to review relative to the REF and what we've generally assumed is a part of those REFs.
Okay.
And then it would be the council taking action to tell us what classification they'd like it to be in. The only other concern that I'd have about that is that if that was something that anyone could petition for, and you felt that as a council, if you felt that there might be more of that, we'd, I think, want to develop a more formalized process. But that certainly is something that can be done.
Okay.
Does that help? Did I answer that? Does that make sense?
In other words, the fair board could just send a request to you and you could,
Yeah, if they send a request to the council or to me or to Pete, we would review that. Again, I think we'd likely respond to them by asking for some of that data, that they provide some of that data, and we're happy to help them a little bit with that. And that then would help us know whether we think it's appropriately scheduled in the classifications.
okay, thank you.
When you're talking about that, Todd, and it's pervious and impervious, you know, I think we need to have, I don't know what our descriptions are on it now, but, you know, you may have an impervious situation with runoff onto the roof, but it may be running onto a pervious
Right.
ground or grass or whatever. So,
Yep.
you know, I know there's, you know, other things that should be considered with that.
Yeah, I think the challenge that we have here, Mayor and members, is that as we've talked about before, under classification 1, which is that single family that's given as a third of an acre, the rest are all done on square footage. We could, with frankly a pretty fair amount of money, run the calculations on all properties and do it that way. But you will spend a little bit of money doing it that way. I'm really trying to find, from an administrative perspective, Mr. Mayor and members, a way to see whether it meets the general criteria that we anticipated for those REFs.
Right.
Rather than, frankly, you spending $30,000 to $50,000 to figure this all out.
No, I understand that, but like I say,
Yeah.
there are, I can see where bigger plots of land where they could argue that, I guess.
You bet, yep.
Anyone else? Right now, we're just talking about the budget part of it. Brad?
Well, I think we should table both the budget and the and the rate discussion. What hasn't been brought up in the presentation this week is that in last week's presentation, the actuals at the end of 2020 had a reserve of 185,000. The actuals this week at the end of 2020 have a reserve of 1,076,000, which is a change of $891,000 to the positive. Last week, we needed this rate increase, and I'm not arguing that we won't. But last week, this budget and the planning around this budget was predicated on we're almost out of money. I mean, at 185,000, we were going to be negative this year. At $1 million under the new budget, if we don't do any rate increases, we're still positive at the end of 2023. In fact, we're positive at a balance higher than what last week's end of 2020 was. I think what we need to do is, based off of this, this is a significant change, is that we take a step back and reassess both the budget and the rate increase at a workshop before we move forward, because this is a huge difference. And I think it changes the dynamic of how we address this. And I will also say, I do disagree with the capital purchases from the fact of they're all cash. For example, tonight in the consent agenda, we approved the purchase of a Kubota tractor for $42,000 on an equipment certificate. This budget has a $45,000 lawnmower paid for cash. Well, if we're so short on cash that we need to raise rates, why are we now suddenly decided that we need to pay cash for this mower here? Same with the Godwin pump for $40,000. That's the idea of the financing, is it spreads the cost out over time. And it seems like there's a desire to just pay cash for it and increase rates when we could increase rates at a lower amount and stretch it out further. And so that's why I say that this has a real impact, and this is why we need more discussion on it. And I know, and I know that the rates are the next thing up, but just for an idea, like I said, the fairground's going to go up $3,600 a year. Living Truth Fellowship Church, that's going up $500 a year. I'm not going to notice the $45 a year on my house at $375 a month, but we are talking huge things. Schools and regional treatment center, total of $36,000 a year. Commercial businesses, $40,000 a year. And this is real dollars when you get beyond the homeowners. And before we jump into a 50% rate increase, we have to take a step back, particularly when you look that $891,000 that was to the positive is actually 3.5 years worth of the rate increase. So we don't need to jump into suddenly making this decision tonight when we suddenly have a significantly different cash position than what we thought we had a week ago. So that is my proposal is based off of the significantly changed dynamic of the cash situation that we actually table this for discussion at a workshop.
So are you making that motion that we table?
I am making a motion that we table the discussion.
All right.
For a workshop on the grounds that the cash position
Right.
has changed dramatically.
Is there a second to that?
Emily will second that.
Okay, all in favor of tabling, this would be just on the stormwater budget part of it, not both of them, we'll do one at a time if so warranted. For tabling the resolution adopting the stormwater budget. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, I heard 5. Opposed? Yeah, I have a nay also, but it's 5-2 that we table this resolution concerning the budget on page 55. Next, we'll go to the, do you also want to make a motion, Brad, at this point for the rate increase schedule, I would assume?
Yes, I would like to make a motion. This is the one that actually concerns me the most, and yes, I would like to make a motion on the rate increase.
All right.
To table it for the workshop.
All right. And there's a motion on the floor for tabling the stormwater rate increase. Is there a second? Okay, we got Brad and Carrie on this one. The first one, I heard Brad and Emily. All in favor of the tabling the resolution for the stormwater rate increase signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Mr. Mayor, nay.
Okay. We will be tabling this one by a vote of 6-1. With that, we will move on. I was in favor of the second one, just for an explanation, because I thought we should have some, because of the numbers, what you were talking about, Brad, I had looked at, of some kind of a phase-in situation, and that's why I wanted to do that, so.
And that's my feeling is that, I agree with the mayor. I'm not saying no rate increases.
Right,
Well, I'm
right.
just thinking some sort of phase in as
Yep,
well. So.
okay, all right. So we will table those two, and next we will move on to the acceptance of a land donation, thank you, Sally, from the Danby Building LLC. Russ?
Yes, Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, I'll refer you to page 58 of the packet. That is an overhead photo of the parcel in question. And I apologize, I didn't provide another map that kind of showed the vicinity in relation to the whole town, but that's on me. You'll notice that I have crosshatched the westerly 30 feet of the property. For some unknown reason, that had never been assembled with the Galt Street right-of-way. And as the Danby Building LLC would look to further develop the property that's been assigned an address of 1675 Galt Street, they would like to donate that to be assembled then with the Galt Street right-of-way. They are pending development. There's actually a public hearing scheduled this Thursday before the Board of Zoning Appeals to consider a variance request. But this is strictly to discuss the donation of the land tonight. It is in the plat of Traverse de Sioux, which was a different community, so we find things of this nature from time to time. And at this point, the Danby Building LLC would like to donate the 30 feet to the west of the property to the city of St. Peter, again, to be assembled with street right of way. Mr. Mayor, I'd answer any questions that you or members of the council might have.
All right, questions for Russ? Steve Grams.
Russ, what is that, on your picture on page 58, what's that building in the lower right? What is that?
That is the neighboring property. That is a non-conforming residential use within an area that is zoned for I-2, general industrial. You notice that the same situation exists on that property, where the ownership is shown to the middle of Galt Street, and I would propose that that would be addressed at such time as that property would be redeveloped.
Okay. All right, thanks, Russ.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, if I could make a
Yes,
comment?
yes.
Just to provide explanation related to your donation policy, any donations of land require a separate action of the city council. There are some levels of money or other gifts that can be accepted administratively, but any land donation must come to the city council as a separate agenda item. That's why it shows up on your agenda.
All right. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Not, the resolution accepting donation from Danby Building LLC of a 30-foot by 120-foot parcel of land be dedicated as Galt Street right-of-way appears on page 60. Is there a motion for approval?
Noel so moves.
Steve Graham, second.
Okay, Shannon 1, Steve 2. Any questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the city code modification for beekeeping. And Todd, if you want to make the presentation or whatever you're doing first, and then we'll hear from our guests that we have here that would like to speak on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The information starts on page 61, and as you see, there is an ordinance modification that has been duly published under Minnesota state statute. And then there's a separate resolution setting a fee if you do move forward with a change in your ordinance. In summary, the ordinance that's included modifies your current ordinance to allow for up to 2 hives to be located in residential areas within St. Peter. And there are specific requirements related to their location, where the bee flyway must be, barriers, and notification to neighbors. It also, as the resolution indicates, it also provides a resolution or provides for the council from time to time to set the fee. And the estimate that I provided for you, the recommendation is at $50 for that fee. Specifically going on to page 62, you'll notice that this is a change to Article 4 for farm, wild, and exotic animals. And really what it does is removes the exemption and provides opportunity for honeybees to be kept. There's a permit requirement, and the permit requirements really are 7-fold, one of which is the applicant must provide a defined structure that's durable for the bees and allow for the entryway or the flyway of the bees to be facing the house structure, so the applicant's home or house. Number 2 is that you can have a maximum of 2 hives, and they must be located in the rear yard. You must demonstrate that the hives are 25 feet from any neighboring structures. The hives must be set back a minimum of 7 feet from the property line. And if you're within that area that is within 25 feet of a property line, you have to have a flyway barrier. In essence, a wall or vegetative growth that makes the bees go up as they leave your property. The applicant must demonstrate some training. We allow that in subsection 6. Generally, there are beekeeping courses that are available from the University of Minnesota and certainly other equivalently accredited post-secondary education institutions. And then lastly, whoever has bees has to make sure that they have water in close proximity. The remainder of the modifications provide for sanitation, again, limit on the number of hives, the inspection that takes place at the time of application, because this would be a permitted use on an annual basis, a permitted use. So there's an inspection that would take place by your building department. And then there are rules related to items that would constitute revocation of a permit or not allowing of a permit. Those are in the bottom of page 64 within your packet. This becomes a petty misdemeanor if you either have bees without a permit or you don't take care of the bees appropriately. And so again, the ordinance modification has been duly published under Minnesota state statute. That's from 62, page 62 to the end of page 65. And then lastly, Mr. Mayor, the resolution is on page 66, establishing the annual fee of $50 per property, not per hive, but per property. I'm happy to stand for questions or explain more. Mayor and members, you've had a lot of opportunity as a group to talk about this. And again, I'm happy to answer questions as best I can.
Okay. Before we go to questions, we're going to go to our two people that have expressed an interest in speaking on this item. So Ken, first way, I'm going to go by the way they were received, or I received them. Mr. Rosso, if you want to come up and first of all push the button on your microphone, and then if you would state your name and address and state what you would like to tell us tonight.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for your time. My name is Ken Rosso. My address is 503 Inverness Lane here in St. Peter. Before I proceed, is it acceptable to remove my masks during the presentation? Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, no,
don't, Ken.
I trimmed my mustache for this event. So.
Sorry.
In addition, I'd also like to thank the council. I know I've spoken to each of you individually, and I appreciate the diligence of which you researched this topic, and I know you take it seriously, and I greatly appreciate that. As a preface, I would indicate I do appreciate honeybees, and as I'll get into a bit later, and when I say a bit later, that does mean a bit. Don't worry, Chuck.
Yep.
They're wonderful for the environment. In fact, they're essential to much of the world, but they also need to be in the proper place. And I'll be speaking against the proposed change to the city code for three basic reasons, and let me expound on those if I may. The first one is pretty obvious. As you are well aware, many people have significant allergy issues with potential bee stings. And adults would by and large be cognizant if they have that situation. What I'd be concerned about would be people that are unaware of that, potentially adults, but more likely children. And that could be a very serious medical situation if a child were to incur a bee sting. Secondly, the honeybees, generally speaking, are docile species. They are not aggressive, but like most creatures, they are defensive. If they feel threatened, they can become very aggressive. I've never had a personal conversation with a honeybee to determine exactly how they define aggressive, but sometimes what appears to potentially to us to be a totally inadvertent activity could be construed as a threat to the hive, e.g. a soccer ball from a neighboring yard, a baseball, a child wandering in to the neighboring lot. And I recognize, as Mr. Prafke discussed moments ago, that there is a protective environment, fence, hedge, whatever, surrounding the proposed hives or hive. However, things happen. Doors are left open, etc. A child could very easily wander onto that neighbor's property and see the enticing box and say, hey, this might be fun to play with. That could be very threatening. Another example of that would be in the fall when the honey is accumulated within the hive. That's an attraction to other hives that do what they call honey robbing, which will make obviously the hive that's being attacked aggressive. Also, other animals, be that opossums, raccoons, skunks, are attracted to that, which can make them aggressive. Also, their range is significant. The flyway is, as Mr. Krafke mentioned a moment ago, would be up and out, but their range can be, and I'm not an expert on honeybees, but several miles potentially, and there's no way to control where they go. The third concern I'd have would be that they are an invasive species. Honeybees are not indigenous to North America. They originated they were imported here, I believe, in early 1600s. They're originally very prevalent in Asia, Africa, and Europe, but they also are a threat theoretically to native pollinators, and be that other bees or other insects. And there are numerous pollinators besides honeybees, as I just mentioned, other types of bees, bats, even flies are pollinators, butterflies, of course. So that's another concern, what their threat might be to the native pollinators. I'm going to use a somewhat simplistic analogy in my conclusion here. I grew up on a farm and I very much appreciate livestock. I also know what weeds are. And a weed is nothing more than a plant that's out of place. And farmers work diligently to grow corn and soybeans in our area. And as an aside, corn is generally wind pollinated, and bees are not particularly significant in the pollination of the commodities of economic value, or significant economic value in south central Minnesota. But a farmer who has corn in his bean field, that's a weed. The next field over is his cornfield. That's where he wants the corn. Bees in the city limits, in my opinion, are quote unquote a weed. They're wonderful in their place. In my opinion, their place should be in the countryside, in a grove of trees adjacent to a clover field, in a grassland. There are numerous locations where they could be, and that would be, in my opinion, much more appropriate. They are also livestock, which makes them a farm animal. I've owned farm animals and I very much appreciate them, but I really don't have any intention of coming to the council and asking if I could bring a cow, which I've owned, to my backyard. Obviously inappropriate and very, very different from a honeybee, but you can maybe see a little bit of parallel. In summary, I'm speaking with concern and against the proposed code change, as I indicated, for health reasons, for potential defensive or / aggressive because of defensive interpretation of their turf, and thirdly because of invasive species. I think it's very important that the council carefully measure the risks associated with changing the city code against the rewards. And with that, I thank you again for your time and patience, and appreciate the opportunity to appear before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ken.
Mr. Westry, if you're still there, if you would give us, I see you coming on, if you would give us your name and address, and then if you were listening, basically what the same format that Mr. Rosso used. Mr. Westry.
Yes, Peter Westry, 446 Nichols Court, St. Peter, obviously St. Peter, sorry about that. I would actually disagree with Mr. Rosso on several points. For one, the honeybees that we have in Minnesota are European honeybees. They're evolved to basically live in a very similar climate to Minnesota. They are you can't say friendly, but the risk in Minnesota is very minimal. Most of the bees that are supplied in Minnesota come from Northern California. There's no chance of Africanized stock. So there's very little aggression inside a honeybee. When you have a low density hive population, which is what this ordinance proposes, the chances of a robbing situation arising are really pretty minimal. The chances of a life-threatening allergy to bees in the United States, there's something, last time I looked, and I didn't have a chance to look tonight, but the last time I looked, there were about 50 deaths a year from bee stings. Now, that's out of a population of 330 million. You're far more likely to be struck by lightning, frankly, than you are to run into that. I'm a nurse practitioner. I have In the Navy, I was a hospital corpsman. It's basic thing. Everybody should have Benadryl. Everybody should have some Zantac. That's just something I think that it's a very minimal risk. We're also talking about, if you think about it, we're also talking about essentially telling beekeepers that they can have their hives in the backyard. They're going to be hidden in several ways. There's going to be enclosed, actually, on 3 sides. If you came to my yard, where I would propose to put my 2 hives, I've got trees on 3 different sides of Nichols Court. I've got flyways, fly up areas 3 different ways. People couldn't even see where these hives be placed in my yard, frankly, from any direction, except my one neighbor directly to the west would be, to the west would be able to. Otherwise, no. As a matter of fact, under the current ordinance in my yard, the neighbor directly up the hill would be the only one to be notified because everybody else is more than 100 feet away. So, in summary, I believe that beehives, that allowing beekeeping, we're doing what other cities in Minnesota have already done. This has already been done. It's already been driven down the path. University of Minnesota Bee Lab supports urban beekeeping. In St. Paul, you can have a goat in your backyard as well as beehives. My daughter lives in Egan. She could have beehives if she wanted. And she has little kids and she would not be opposed. So I'm going to say that I think that the risks are very minimal. I think that if we have to, we could ask beekeepers to post signs, and there are signs available saying, this is an apiary, and give people, fair warning. But your home is your home, and your yard is your yard. You should be able to have some hobbies like beekeeping. Bees are fascinating creatures. If you look at it, they are very capable of voting and deciding what to do. They're a fascinating creature. Their human brain is about 3 pounds. A cluster of bees is about 3 pounds. They have the same innate capability of making reasoned decisions, which we don't all understand, but they're fascinating. They're absolutely fascinating. The only other thing I would speak to is I think that making the fee a one-time fee makes sense. I don't think $50 annually is a fair fee when you consider the cost of beekeeping. It's $100 a package, and most beekeepers have to buy packages every year. Okay, you're adding about $25 to the cost. I think that treating it like, the one-time fee, sure, but then treat it like a dog license and stuff with 20 years, $5 or $10 a year. Nobody's going to complain about that. That's the only things that I would actually ask the council to consider. I thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you for being here tonight, and Mr. Rosso also. We appreciate it when citizens come in and give us their opinion on items. Don't see people very often, and I wish we saw more of it. We will now move to questions and discussion or whatever on the ordinance proposal that's in front of us. Does anybody have any questions or anything to add? Carrie?
Yes, so I believe it was Councilmember Graham's brought up last time we talked, I think it was at a workshop, the last workshop anyway, about the signage. And I didn't see that added in the ordinance, and I thought maybe there was consensus on that for the folks that indicated they're wanting to move forward with this. Is that, was that your opinion, Todd, or I just noticed it wasn't added?
It was not added. Based on my notes, I believe that was something that did not have significant consensus and was in some ways overridden by the notification change that's included towards the end of the notice. As you may recall, originally that there was an applicant notification for neighbors, but that was modified to the city providing notification to help ensure that it was received, or at least greater opportunity for it to be done and controlled by the city to ensure it happened with neighbors. But it certainly is something that you could make a modification to the ordinance in under page 63 or page 64 at the top within those 7 items. We could add an 8th that would require signage of some type.
I have a second question. The permit fee, as I am reading the ordinance, it does sound like it's an annual fee.
Yep.
And it is. Okay, so at one point we talked about $45 for the original fee. I don't have a problem with $50 as the original fee, but it was $5 for moving forward annually. And so help me understand how that fee process changed or what the justification for that is.
Again, based on the last workshop, my understanding is that you indicated as a council that you thought $50 would be appropriate based on the information that I gave you. Again, that's something certainly you can modify as a part of this. I think you are correct, Councilmember Johnson, that you went back and forth between an annual fee and a one-time fee. And maybe not everybody was of the same mind as you were talking about this in workshop.
A strong justification for city time or city work that's involved annually to justify $50 a year?
It really is, depending on how you want that inspection to occur. Again, this assumes that there is an inspection each year. Again, if you don't want to have an inspection each year, then certainly the cost to administrate this would be dramatically lower. But from my perspective, that inspection takes about $45 to $50 to make happen.
Anyone else? Comments?
Brad's got his hand up.
Oh, boy, I see a bunch of them now. Start with Brad.
Yeah, actually, I'm following up on what Carrie said. The fee, I do believe, it might be one that we want to propose to drop it to $5. Because it does say in Section 8, 255, no inspection is required upon renewal of permit for a renewal permit. So it looks like we're not actually requiring an annual inspection. If we do, and I'm fine if we do require an annual one, but if we're not requiring an annual inspection, then best way to do is, I guess, make it like a dog license. But so I am seeing that. But I did have a question on the notification, because it says, well, in the same section, inspection and abutting property notice. It says owners within 100 feet of the subject property. So is it abutting properties, or is it going to be 100 feet from like property lines? Because as I understood it, abutting properties were ones that just essentially touched the properties, whereas 100 feet could, whereas owners within 100 feet may not necessarily be an abutting property.
Correct. This is not necessarily a budding property. This would be any property owner within 100 feet.
And would that be of the property? I'm assuming that's the property lines and not just the hive location, but the property lines itself?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't have any problem with that. I just want clarification on.
All right. Shannon.
Thanks. I wanted to also address the permit fee. I know when we discussed it previously, I don't think we should look at the permit fee as a money-making venture. I don't think we want to make a lot of money on it or any money on it, but I do want the fee to accurately cover staff time in terms of doing the inspection. Now, if we decide not to do an annual inspection, I think it's reasonable to do something more like a $5 a year, but I think when we talked about it before, I did favor a higher fee that would cover staff time.
Mayor, if I could respond to that. I think if you go to page 66, if that's the direction that you want to go under the way the current ordinance is drafted, certainly I believe that a permit fee of $50 is reasonable and rational based on about an hour of time, getting out to the site, et cetera, reviewing the plan that's provided, processing the paperwork. You could certainly modify that on page 66 to then include a second category, so an XX. Again, that would be filled in with a number based on your fee schedule. You could have another number, which was XX, that is annual renewal of $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you want that number to be. You could certainly do that as a part of this.
Okay, Shannon, were you done? Sorry, was that it?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, Emily.
Thanks. My questions about the fees were answered. I just have a few things to say, mostly in response to our guests tonight. Many of you already know my feelings on this matter, but since tonight's the official vote, I wanted to kind of summarize a few of the things that I've said in our discussions so that anyone else who may be listening is aware of where I stand on this. So I have learned a lot about this endeavor over the last handful of years, And particularly in my conversation at Gustavus, I feel greatly confident that this would be an overwhelmingly positive move for St. Peter to make. I have heard no convincing argument against it and have only heard from one person not in favor, and that was Mr. Rosso, who spoke tonight, while dozens have shared their support with me. One of our items of vital importance says that we strive to always improve on environmental sustainability. And this action would undoubtedly show that St. Peter is proactive in caring for our environment in meaningful, tangible ways, while also keeping safety and accountability priorities as outlined in the ordinance. And I really do appreciate all of the hard work and discussions we've had as a council on designing an ordinance that keeps safety in mind, and then allows for hobbyists, like Pete talked about a little bit ago, to have a hobby in their backyard. Just a couple more comments. To further the conversation about helping both honeybees and native bees, I've done a lot of research in both of those areas. And I would say, you know, we need honeybees if we want to continue eating fruits and vegetables that we're accustomed to. And we need native bees to keep our local and regional ecosystems healthy and thriving. I have not heard or read anywhere that one of these is more important than the other. You know, I think a both and approach to helping all of our pollinators would be prudent, personally. And then one additional opinion, and this may address something that Mr. Rosso said. It's an opinion I learned from a TED Talk expert a few months ago. He explained that beekeeping in cities is actually more productive and sustainable than rural beekeeping. This is because in populated areas, there are gardens and flowers and blooming trees in closer proximity, while our farm country is a food desert to bees, both native and honey, due to the lack of diverse flowering vegetation and the elimination of our prairies and pesticides and all of those things used in our farmland. If you drive outside of St. Peter, for example, you see vast stretches of farmland and a lack of prairie. And I noticed that personally when I kept bees, or when my husband did. The difference between in town and out of town in production was astronomical. It was noticeably different because they just don't have as much access to food in the country in this area. I guess I would close with saying, you know, I kind of wish we could legislate certain things like wasps away, but they're already here in our ecosystem. You know, I'm not a big fan of wasps, or some other creepy crawlies are not my favorite things, but they're already here. We can't say, no, we don't want honeybees in town. They already exist here. And this is, so whether or not we would have an ordinance regarding the keeping of honeybees, they're already here. All of the risks, even though they're minimal, that you outlined, they're already here. So I'm just not really sure what else we could do about that. But in summary, I am very supportive of this and any measure that promotes environmental sustainability, restoration, and preservation, and I encourage others to do the same. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Ed?
Okay, everybody on the council pretty much knows what I feel about this. I think having bees in town is a big safety hazard. And I don't think it's necessary because we go chickens, bees, what's going to be next? For the next thing, if it does pass, I think it should stay as a $50 annual fee. And last thing is, Emily, how could you tell the difference in production when bees weren't legal in town?
Thanks for the question, Ed. Back in I think it was 2017, my husband and I had a hive in town unknowingly against city ordinance. And it was brought to our attention and then addressed. And we ultimately moved our hive out of town.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anyone else? Emily, some of the comments you made about the bees, the native ones and the European bees, you know, getting along. I guess I brought this up in previous discussions that we have, and when you were saying that, I'm also looking at, and maybe the next time I see him, if he talks to me, I'm gonna ask Mr. Brand why he lied to us 3 years ago. Because he said exactly the opposite. So I'm just kind of curious how we pick and choose some of the things we listen to on some of this. The question, another point I have, Todd, is looking at 8-230 on housing. How come we don't have bees listed in that list? We seem to do it everywhere else. Or maybe I'm misreading how this is supposed to read. If you go back to the previous page, we list bees out there. Under B, exceptions. And like I say, maybe I'm misreading it.
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that you're misreading it. I do know that we do in 8-257 on page 64 outline essentially that in item 7. And so if they would, their permit or their ability to provide for the bees would not be allowed if they provide, if they're not taken care of, including parasites. Removal of animals from the hive, including parasites.
Okay. But why, I guess I don't understand under housing why these other ones are listed and bees are not. I still don't understand, I guess.
Yeah, I don't have a great explanation in the drafting of this, even though I did the vast majority of that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
It was my intent to provide for that under a reason for revocation. In some instances, this is an outdoor usage, where in -8-230, those are generally, although not always, including rabbits and chickens, indoor. Gerbils, guinea pigs, hamsters, canaries, parakeets. So it certainly could be in 230, or it could continue in 257.
Okay, well
I think
then.
the results would be similar.
Okay, and then 231 is the same situation. Treatment is unlawful for any person to treat any animal, dog, cat, non-game fish, gerbil, guinea pig, hamster, all the list. I don't see bees in there.
Mr. Mayor, I can speak directly to that one in my drafting. I was not sure how to demonstrate mistreatment of the bees except in those areas that I thought made sense under 257, under the revocation, which would create a nuisance. It's been absconded. They don't have adequate water.
Okay.
Weeds haven't been removed.
All right.
That's the only basis that I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Emily, I know you've have experience with this, and you kind of said something about it. Once you found out that the bees, you couldn't have them, what did you do with them?
We brought them out of town.
Okay. To a farmer, or just let them go?
A friend of mine let us have our hives on their property.
How did they do out there?
Neither hive made it, but that's pretty typical. That neither one of them survived. They did production-wise, not that great.
Why didn't they survive?
It's typical for honeybee hives. What Pete Westry said a little bit ago, and having to buy packages of bees every year to fill up a hive. Hives have at least a 50% die-off rate at this point because of lack of food and pesticides and other hosts of issues that come up. And so that's why they're in kind of critical shape right now.
I was reading an article today that said 10 reasons why beehives die or why bees die. And 9 out of the 10 were caused by humans and the beekeepers. So I'm just kind of curious what now makes you, or if you have to take them away or whatever, again, what makes you think, what plans do you have? Because there's pretty specific plans in the article that I saw on how you could prevent all of these things that you had just mentioned. So I was wondering, is that something that you take into account now, or isn't that a factor?
It really kind of depends. Some things are out of my control. I mean, I don't use any chemicals or pesticides in my yard, but I can't control my neighbors. And the bees go a variety of places, and they could bring pesticides back to the hive, regardless of where they are, in town or out of town. And so that's largely out of my control. If they don't have enough food, if they're in a food desert and they can't collect enough pollen to make honey for the winter, which is how they survive over winter, is they eat the honey. If they don't make enough, they're not going to survive through the winter. So there's a lot of different factors that are out of human control.
No,
but
that one there you can control, because there was a measure that said it was very simple on how to do that. If they didn't have enough to survive for the winter, that you could manually manipulate that by doing that with the hive. And those are the concerns I have. It's just, we say these things, unlawful for any person to treat these creatures, God's creatures, in a cruel or inhumane manner. And it's kind of like, oh, they die, but I'm not going to do anything to try to prevent them from dying or from helping them to survive. It's not all just nature. It's man getting in the middle of some of this stuff and not taking responsibility for helping them. Any other questions or comments?
Brad has.
Brad.
So on the annual renewal, I'd actually be in favor. I would push that we do annual inspections at the $50 fee. That way it would keep the owner, it would have someone looking over their shoulder. It would also, I think, limit the number of people wanting to do hives, just because in that, which part of the issue would be, too many people jumping in. Well, if you have someone looking over your shoulder, I'm in favor of that would be changing section 8.255. Instead of no inspection required for a renewal of permit, it would be annual inspection required for a renewal of a permit. At which point, then we would just keep the $50 fee in place. And in that case, then we wouldn't have to worry about any fee adjustments as well. I think personally, an annual inspection in a situation like this isn't unwarranted. So.
Okay, I would, Steve.
First of all, I just got some comments, Mr. Mayor. Emily, you mentioned that you don't like creepy crawlers when they're here. I've been accused of being a creepy crawler. So I'm just afraid I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I know Brad.
You mean we don't have a Steve repellent yet?
Well, we're getting one. We're getting to that. I think the mayor's talked about that. The other statement, I appreciate you, Ms. Johnson, bringing up the issue about having the sign posted. I brought that up to Mr. Pratsky this afternoon, that I would like to have the ordinance amended so that it would include the requirement that a sign be posted in a quite visible location. That the premises does have a honeybee on premise. Now, I am not a Facebooker, and I talk to people. Now, I think I bet you that since March 1st, I have probably seen 15 healthcare providers. That's my life lately. As you get to be an old white guy like I am, you get to see a lot of healthcare providers. But anyway, so I asked every one of them the same question. I said, do you feel that we should allow honeybees in our community in St. Peter? And all of the people that I talked to, exclusive of one, was an RN, one LPN, and one physician, general practitioner. Of all of those people that I talked to, only one RN, and she happened to be the RN that gave me my last COVID injection on March 31st. She is a longtime resident of St. Peter. She is an RN out of Brown County, but she was helping Nicollet County do the injections. And she had the great honor of injecting me. But anyway, she kind of waffled back and forth. She really wasn't sure how to answer the question. And she said, I really like honey a lot. And I said, well, that's good. I said, that's great. I said, but that's not my question. And I said, she said, I have children, but I don't know if they're allergic to bees. I said, well, let's say they were. What would your position be? She said, well, then I would be against them. The doctor I had talked with said that she had seen children and some adults that had reactions to bee stings, and she said it was not a very pleasant experience to help those people out. So the next thing that I did is I went and I talked to all of these people, RNs, medical professionals, and by and large, everyone was against honeybees being in town. And finally, I talked to two people that were not in the healthcare profession, three actually, no, two. One of them asked me, well, they knew the situation that Emily had brought forward back when Emily first moved here. And he said, and again, you have to understand, these are not my comments. These are what I'm getting, and I'm trying to be verbatim. The question was asked, well, did Emily run for city council to change the ordinance to allow bees, or did she run for city council to provide a better environment for our community? I said, that's for you. You to ask Emily. Don't ask me. Another person said, all right, so if Emily was, the same person said, well, if somebody in Emily's neighborhood complained about the bees, then what recourse does that individual have now that they will be allowed? And I said, well, based on what I'm seeing, none. And he said, well, that really that's not fair. And I said, well, yeah, I guess fair is probably a monopoly, I told him. So then the final healthcare professional that I talked with last week, I said to this young woman, they're all young people I'm talking to, I said, what do you think about having honeybees in St. Peter? And she just about jumped out of her chair. She said, well, my parents are professional honeybee keepers. They're retired now. They sold their hives. But her first comment was, honeybees do not belong in a city. And she said the reason that they don't is there's so many poisons available. I said people are fertilizing their grass. They're killing the weeds. They're killing insects, ants and bugs and everything else around their perimeters. And she said there's a chemical that a lot of these companies now are spraying on their seeds. They're called neonicotinoids. The whole class, there's about 7 different brands that they spray on these the seeds that become part of the DNA structure, and it kills the insects that get interacted with those plants. And she said bees will interact with those particular flowers or plants or whatever, and they're going to die from the poison that's attached. And I know from my own reading that they're finding these neonicotinoids in the lakes in northern Minnesota. They're finding that now in the soil across the state. And then I went back and I looked at, I read a couple of articles in the Journal of Asthma and Allergy. The article was dated June of 2018. It said 1% of children are severely allergic to bee stings. 5 to 7.5% of the population will experience a severe allergic reaction to bee stings. And then it said the risk rises to 32% for beekeepers. And finally then, back at our last workshop they had, which was March 1st, there was a word that was expressed to me. So I happened to be reading an article in the Washington Post, March the 16th. And it was interesting. It was an op-ed by E.J. Donnie. And in it, I'm just going to read the first paragraph. And it was about the interaction of the United States and China. It was talking about the fear that China is developing across the world because they're expanding and taking over. It said, we typically see fear as a negative emotion, and it often can breed hostility, self-involvement, and even hatred. But fear can also be a constructive force. We drive more carefully because we fear accidents, save because we fear hard times ahead, and protect our children because we fear anything that could hurt them. So it is with fear the current regime in China is spreading across the U.S. political spectrum. And in closing, my fellow council representatives and Mr. Mayor, I really had an interesting conversation with the Swenson brothers, Ole and Sven Swenson, in front of the Nicollet Cafe, but I think I might have to share that some other time. But there were some interesting comments about the commodity prices of the bees on the market, the honeybee and the honey, and also comments about each one of us on the city council, and in particular Brad DeVos. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor, relative to bees.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Now you can all wake up.
Carrie?
Just for clarification, there are two separate actions, so it's approving the ordinance and then approving the rate by the council.
I didn't hear the last part.
Carrie, you're cutting in and out.
Speak up.
Can you hear me now?
What Carrie said there, or asked the question if there was two different actions, and yes, there is. There's the ordinance for beekeeping, and then there is a fee schedule resolution following that.
So I guess, Councilmember DeVos, I'm not in agreement about the annual inspection. I've heard from a number of people that, you know, it could create a barrier for people that want to do this. And I really don't think that having an annual inspection, you know, I don't think we need to try to deter it because beekeeping is so involved. I think that in itself is going to deter a number of you know, residents from doing this. It's going to be a smaller group. I don't know if you heard any of that.
All right?
Yeah, we heard it.
Okay, so I just want to make clear to the council, I'm not in favor of that. I would be more in favor of the $50 initial inspection fee, permit cost, and a $5 renewal fee. Thank you.
Anyone else? Todd, I lost track of all these changes and things. I'm going to suggest this, because we did it earlier. I am going to make a motion that we, because of all these changes, and I am more confused than when we got here today, make a motion to table the ordinance vote till 2 weeks from tonight, when we can have a clean copy of the ordinance in front of us, and then proceed from there. Is there a second?
Ed'll second.
Oh, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mayor 1, Steve 2. All in favor of tabling the ordinance vote till 2 weeks from tonight, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Steve Graham.
Okay, I heard 4, I heard Brad, and also Ed. Opposed?
Nay.
No.
Okay, so it was vote 4-3 to table, so what we will do, we will table the ordinance vote until we get a clear copy of what is going on, so we can get some definite answers, I guess, not answers, but definite results as to our discussion tonight.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could?
Yes.
Just for clarification on my part, my belief then is that you would like to see this again at a workshop?
Yes, I should have said that first.
Okay, I just
Yes.
wanted to make sure I understood because
Yes.
there were no motions to modify the ordinance.
No, well,
Okay.
there was
There
no
was a
motion.
couple of ideas thrown out.
Yeah, but like I say, there's
Okay.
some things in here I think we need to get more discussion on or get, before we come to a vote on it.
All right.
Next up, we have so therefore, the resolution on page 66. I will also make a motion to table that for discussion for next week's workshop, and then follow it up in 2 weeks from tonight with a vote. Is there a second?
Ed'll second.
Okay, Mayor 1, Ed 2, all in favor of tabling the resolution for the fee schedule, signify by saying aye.
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 I heard 5. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 2 nays. That one passes 5-2. We will table that until, for a vote for 2 weeks from tonight. Thank you, Mr. Rosso. Thank you, Mr. Westry, for your input once again. Next up, we have, I guess that concludes our new business. The next thing we have is a call for a closed session, executive session, to discuss 3 items, an eminent domain proceedings, pending threatened assessment litigation, and also a union negotiation contract with the Communication Technician Union.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can?
Yes.
We would plan to come back into open session for action
Yes.
potentially on 2 of those items, and then reports from the mayor and city administrator after that point.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I would anticipate that the discussion would take approximately on these 3 items, 20 minutes in total.
Okay.
And so we would look to people who are with us virtually to return at that time, and I'll have the meeting opened up if it's still open. If not, it will remain closed. And if you just kind of stay in waiting, then I'll unlock the meeting to let you in when we are ready to go again.
Okay? So we will, first thing I need is a motion for the resolution for calling for the 3 closed sessions.
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Carrie 1, Shannon 2, all in call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. So what we will do, we will recess to the closed session, and we will be back in 20 minutes. The time right now is 8:34 p.m. on Monday, April 12th, 2021. And the on Monday, April 12th, 2021. It is 9:30. Next thing up, we will go back to new business, and it is the ends eminent domain proceedings. Todd and Jim?
Mr. Mayor and members, you did have a closed session related to this. Our goal for this action item is for you to provide a resolution that directs the city attorney to provide a last and best final offer on the eminent domain process related to the Larry or Levon and Larry N's property. Mr. Mayor, in just a few moments, I'll have a resolution on your screen here that provides for that information. And so if you can see the screen, I can certainly scroll through the whole resolution, Mr. Mayor and members, but the middle of the screen, the first whereas that is above the now therefores is the area that was filled in based on your closed session, Mr. Mayor, and provides for a $45,500 offer on the easement and crop damage of $5,000, Mr. Mayor, for a total of $50,500 as an offer.
Okay. Questions, comments? Todd, what's the, I ran the next one, but I didn't run this one. What's the title on this resolution? What does it say?
Give me just a moment, Mr. Mayor, and I'll move it so I can scan or slide it up here a little bit. A resolution authorizing the extension of a last written offer to Levon A. Enns and Larry F. Enns, her husband.
All right. Questions? I didn't see anybody.
I'm going to get the screen to be normal size again here, Mr. Mayor,
All
just
right.
in case. Unless anybody else needs to see it, I can go back.
So we have a resolution for the extension of a offer to the Larry and Levon Enns for the property for an easement, eminent domain easement, I guess, for lack of better. Is there a motion to approve?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any other any comments or questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye. Resolution is approved. Next up, we have a communication technician union contract. Todd.
Mr. Mayor and members, in just a few moments, I'll try and show up on the screen. I have reached a tentative agreement. You just had a closed session on this item. The union has responded to the negotiation and has provided signature on a contract for the 2021 year. It would be a one-year contract with an increase of wages of 2% across the board, a modification to the maximum vacation accrual for those employees that have service of 35 years or more with you to 18 hours, an increase in training differential of from 50 cents to $1, a modification to the uniform allowance, the additional letter of agreement related to the city's health insurance options, and then any technical changes related to dates or names, etc. Mr. Mayor, members, I'm recommending approval of a resolution that directs you and I to enter into that contract.
Okay. Questions?
I'll get rid of the screen so we can see everyone, Mr. Mayor. There you go.
Todd, I have a question. How many people are in this union?
I believe it is 5, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Including part-timer.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, let me
Yep.
provide a clarification on that. You actually have more employees, but there are certain part-timers that are included in the unit and some that are not. And so that's why I believe
Okay.
it is 5.
All right. Okay. There are no other questions. This one I did copy of. There's a resolution that was provided to us via email approving the contract between the City of St. Peter and law enforcement, labor, local, the communication technicians for calendar year 2021. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
All right.
Carrie Johnson
We
will
have
second.
Steve 1, Carrie 2. Any more questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports And the only thing I have here tonight, excuse me, is an Arbor Day Proclamation, and it says, whereas Minnesota's forest treasures were a significant attraction to early settlers because of their usefulness and the beautiful environment they protected. And whereas trees are an increasingly vital resource in Minnesota today, enriching our lives by purifying air and water, helping conserve soil and energy, serving as recreational settings, providing habitat for wildlife of all kinds, and making our cities more livable. And whereas Arbor Day was founded on April 10th, 1872 by J. Sterling Morton at Nebraska City, Nebraska, and whereas in 1876, Minnesota became the 4th state to adopt Arbor Day, and whereas the citizens of St. Peter have proudly participated in the celebration of Arbor Day and Arbor Month for many years, now therefore I, Charles Zeman, Mayor of the City of St. Peter, Minnesota, do hereby proclaim April 30th, 2021 as Arbor Day in the city and encourage citizens to participate in tree planting activities in their homes and businesses in witness thereof. Todd.
Mr. Mayor, members, I would like to direct you, I'm sorry we missed one thing that I want to make sure we have a clarification on. This relates to new business item G. There is supposed to be a second resolution that accompanies the final offer. As we talked about previously, this would be a resolution directing the city attorney to commence with the eminent domain proceedings on the ends property. So we have two resolutions, one which you took action on in the last final offer. The second, which I failed to mention again, relates to directing the city attorney to start that eminent domain process.
Okay. Everyone understand? Okay. That resolution directing the city attorney to continue with his negotiations, or to accomplish, hopefully, negotiations on this eminent domain ends property.
And technically what this does, Mr. Mayor, is it directs the city attorney to file the court papers that are necessary.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Good clarification. Is there a motion to approve?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any other questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grams?
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Noel?
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson?
Aye.
Mayor Zeman?
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos?
Aye.
Councilmember Ruflap?
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Todd, we're going to go back to reports, and you are up.
Mr. Mayor and members, thank you for your time tonight. I'm sorry I did not guess well on the length of the closed session. I'll try and do a better job in the future. I'll guess much longer, and we'll hope for shorter. Mr. Mayor, I do have two things that I'd love to have Pete talk about, one of which is spring hydrant flushing, which you may have recognized was going on last week. And so I'd love to have Pete give a little bit of an update on that, Mr. Mayor, and then I have one last item.
Okay. Mr. Moulton.
Good evening. So the hydrant flushing went really well this spring here. The crew did run into a little bit of weather, which you guys are probably aware, but we did get all 625 hydrants flushed. Run into a little landscaping issue in a couple of spots, but we were able to correct those and get things going on. Very few service calls related to rusty water this year. So things went well. We're hoping for another successful summer, and we'll go into fall flushing with the idea that we'll probably do dead ends.
Pete, if I can, it might be helpful for you to take a few moments and talk about the 2 or 3 reasons we do hydrant flushing. Why do we do hydrant flushing, Pete?
Yeah, well, we do hydrant flushing for a couple of reasons. One is we're trying to keep the chlorine level up so we have our water properly disinfected. We like to turn it over at the end of the year because in areas that are low flow, a lot of times we'll have a little bit of stagnation in the water. And the third is to clean the water mains out so that we can remove all barnacles and growth inside of those mains.
Pete would also tell you that the last item that is equally important is to ensure that the fire hydrants are exercised in case we need them in the event of a fire. And so that's very important that we do this on a regular basis. So Pete's crew does it officially. Pete, how many fire hydrants again?
625 roughly.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of fire hydrants. Okay, thank you,
Yep.
Pete. Mayor members, I have one last one.
Yep.
This relates to having Pete give us just a little bit of update on the Emerald Ash Borer program. As some of you may have seen in recent publications or on the news, Emerald Ash Borer now has been reported in counties abutting Nicollet County. And so the declaration through the state of Minnesota is done on a county-by-county basis, not on a city-by-city basis. So we've had a program that you approved and established. Pete, can you talk about that just a few moments?
You bet. Since 2019, we've really had a plan that we've been implementing to do multiple different processes to try to control EAB or minimize the EAB system on our trees. In 2020, we started with chemical treatments, and we started with 32 of our largest, our 20 inches in diameter trunks, with a rating of 7 and higher. So what happens is our forester goes out and he rates all of our ash trees in town on a scale of 1 through 10. We do not chemically treat anything below a 7 because our findings show that you're probably wasting your money. If you do get EAB, you're just throwing good money after bad trying to save those. So save the larger ones, because what EAB does, it affects and impacts older trees, I should say poor quality trees in high dense areas. So what we did was, and I know you probably can't see this map too good, but the red areas are basically our downtown 3rd, 4th, 5th Street, Washington Avenue, where the tornado came through and a lot of these trees were replanted 20 some years ago. Those are our dense areas, and it goes from green being a good population or a good variety of trees to the yellow where there's some density issues to red where they're overpopulated. And as you guys know, after the tornado, we planted a lot of ash trees. The other process in 2020 was to remove 17 ash trees that had 20-inch diameter bases that were 4 and less, meaning that they graded out really poorly, whatever the case may be, just not very healthy. And so we took those out. And then the remaining step 3 was to remove 73 ash trees with trunk sizes smaller than 20 inches, but larger than 2, that also graded out on a poor scale of 4 and less. So what we're trying to do is 4 and less means, we're probably gonna have to cut them down if something goes wrong. 4 to 7 means we'll give it another look. If the tree can recoup a little bit after we give it some space, work through density issues, we'll see how it works out. So they did accomplish everything they needed to last year. Our forestry department and parks department worked really well together and got that work done. In 2021, here's our goals going forward. We're going to chemically treat 90 additional ash trees with trunk sizes 15 inches through 20 inches with a condition of 7 and higher. We think we can do that in the early part of May and June. We do have another 104 trees that are earmarked to be removed. Their grades are below 4, meaning that probably not a good chance to have those around because EAB attacks those density, heavy density trees that are poor condition. 58 of those trees are what we call outside the corridor. So what we do when we chemically treat an EAB tree, one of these 90 that we're going to do, they create about a 300-foot diameter protection zone around that tree that we treat for prevention of EAB. 58 of that 104 trees are outside of that zone. The others are inside that zone that we're going to take out because they're just poor quality. So we're looking at buffer zone, reevaluating this year. We hope we got another great plan by fall, but really what we're going to do is thin the density, thin the herd a little bit, and then treat the good larger trees and remove the poorer trees. And that's pretty much where we're at right now. The plan is seeming to work. Like Todd mentioned, EAB is all around us and it does concern us, especially since it's in Blue Earth County and Sibley County going the other direction. So how about questions that I might be able to answer?
Questions
related to that?
Mr. Moulton. Steve?
Pete, regarding the removal of trees, I know this is probably a premature question, but I know it is. But what is the plan going forward for replacement of additional trees in our community?
Yep, great question. What we'll do is we'll reevaluate that at the same time we're going out and doing our year-end evaluation process. We do have quite a few trees planted in our nursery, which is on the north end of town here. And as you guys know, you authorize the use of a spade. We're going to start putting in different varieties in some of the boulevards here this spring yet. So our goal is every one we take out, we put in 2. But we want to do it in the proper manner. Some of these really just needed to be thinned in the first place. So it may not be in the dense areas that you saw on the map. It may be more in the green spaces or the green areas on the map. So the goal is 2 to 1. And we're also looking at some areas in certain watersheds to try to help with water quality. We got a couple of different things going on there with our forestry and parks and our stormwater utility.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask 2 more questions?
You got it.
Regarding, there are very few proclamations that our mayor entertains in our community. One of them is Arbor Day. And is there anything that the city can do to promote Arbor Day for citizens to buy trees at a reduced rate so that they can go ahead and we encourage people to plant them in their yards?
Yeah, we used to have a program every now and every few years we would. That's more of a budgeting item, and we can certainly look at some of that. But the hard part is most of the time when we're buying trees, we don't have a great nursery stock yet. We're starting to build that up little by little, but we do have an overall tree program that we could work with Nicollet County on. Then it's just a budget or a funding mechanism that we'd have to arrange for.
In some previous years, Mr. Mayor and members, we have received grant funds through the state of Minnesota, but those offerings have been far apart and few between over the last number of years.
So it'd be interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead, Pete.
There has been a few more grant opportunities once your community or your county is infected. So given time, we might be right in that realm, not too far down the road. But there are some programs that are starting to come through the DNR.
And then one final question. This is for Todd and for everybody's information. When the answer to the question I asked you 2 weeks ago regarding the stump that's left on the tree when our tree guy trims the trees and he leaves the stump on there? Why is that?
I have not talked to Pete about that, but I think you're talking about certain trees where we do a pruning and we leave a couple feet of the branch on the tree when it's pruned. Is there a reason for that, Pete? Or should we respond later to that once we both know better?
Well, it's not a couple of trees. It's pretty much all trees that I have seen. This is important business, Todd, you know. Put the honeybees aside. Let's get the answers to this.
So you're talking, Stephen, after we've removed the tree?
No.
Just at time of pruning, Pete, when we prune a branch from a tree, why do we leave another foot or two of that remaining branch? We don't cut it right at the trunk.
More like a limb.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's the way they cut it nowadays so that they can have the tree grow around that cut. And it's usually not 2 feet. It's usually 6 to 4 inches.
Right, because I mentioned it to Todd, and the old days, it used to be that you cut it flush with the tree, and then the tree would heal itself over, and there wouldn't be any area where any kind of pests could get in the tree to compromise itself. Okay, thank you. I figured there was something new and improved. If you got somebody with a master's degree, it got to be new and improved.
All right. Steve, on Arbor Day, April 30th, I'm going to be doing my part. If you're wondering about, I have a photo opportunity, I guess, with planting a tree. We're going to be doing. Haven't done one for years and years and years, but we're doing one of those.
Well, that's good. That's good to see. I'd like to see that picture when you're finished. We can put it in the St. Peter Herald. That might be a wonderful
Yeah.
addition to the
Well, I
paper.
gotta learn how to run that big tree spade thing that we're getting first, so.
Mr. Mayor, other than the commentary about the tree spade, that's all I have for you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, anybody have anything else to add? It's only 5 to 10. If no one else has anything else to add, we will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Ed will make a motion to adjourn.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Add 1, carry 2. All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.